My name is Rebecca, and I'm 48 years old, living in Denver, Colorado. 3 years ago, my world crumbled when my husband Michael was taken from me by a sudden stroke. There had been no warning signs, no opportunity for final words, just the crushing silence that follows when the person who gave your life meaning simply vanishes. Our home, once filled with warmth and conversation, became a mausoleum of memories, and I found myself suffocating in grief so profound I couldn't imagine ever breathing freely again. I had lost my mother 6 years earlier and believed I understood what mourning meant. But losing Michael was entirely different. He wasn't merely my spouse, he was my closest confidant, my spiritual partner, the man who had walked beside me through every challenge. Our house had been a haven of faith and connection, where we shared morning prayers and evening reflections on scripture. Without him, even my conversations with God felt empty, reverberating in rooms that still held traces of his cologne. Weeks dissolved into months of aimless survival. I would wake, stare at the ceiling, and question why the Almighty had permitted this tragedy. Church felt alien now, populated by well-meaning people who spoke of divine plans while I struggled with fundamental doubts about everything I had once accepted without question. I abandoned my Bible reading, ceased praying, stopped caring about anything beyond the minimal requirements of getting through each day. Then, on a sweltering afternoon in late August, as I walked past a demolition site returning from a grocery run where I had barely purchased enough food to sustain myself, I heard something that penetrated my numbness. A faint whimpering sound emerged from behind a pile of construction debris. Initially, I attempted to ignore it and continue walking. But something in that cry reached through the emotional armor I had built around my heart. Behind a heap of discarded lumber and rusted pipes, I discovered a small border collie puppy, barely clinging to life. His ribs were visible through his matted coat, his eyes were clouded with dehydration, and he was so weak he could hardly raise his head. Someone had abandoned him like refuse, left him to perish alone in the Colorado heat. I had never been particularly drawn to animals. Michael had always wanted a dog, but I had consistently found reasons to avoid the commitment. But gazing at this dying creature, I couldn't simply walk away. Perhaps it was how he looked at me, with eyes that seemed to recognize suffering in a way that felt familiar. Perhaps it was seeing my own abandonment reflected in his gaze. Whatever the reason, I found myself kneeling in the dirt, gently lifting his fragile body and carrying him home. I named him Joshua, after the biblical leader who remained steadfast when others lost courage. Initially, caring for him felt like another burden added to my already overwhelming sorrow. He was ill, requiring constant attention, expensive veterinary treatments I could barely afford, and patience I wasn't sure I possessed. The house that had been silent now echoed with his whimpers and the sound of his claws on the hardwood floors Michael had installed with such pride. For weeks, I resented the disruption he brought to my carefully maintained misery. But as Joshua grew stronger, something unexpected began happening. His playful spirit started to crack the shell of isolation I had constructed around myself. When he gazed at me with those intelligent amber eyes, I felt seen in a way I hadn't experienced since Michael's death. When he rested his head on my lap during the endless, sleepless nights, I felt less alone. Gradually, almost without realizing it, I began speaking to God again. Not the formal prayers of my past, but raw, honest conversations about pain, about purpose, about whether there was any meaning left in a world that could steal everything you cherished. And somehow Joshua seemed to understand. He would sit quietly beside me during these moments, as if he too were listening, as if he too were seeking answers. Just as I was beginning to believe that perhaps God hadn't completely forgotten me, just as I was starting to discover small reasons to continue living, everything changed in a single, devastating moment. It was August 28th, 2025, a beautiful Friday morning. The Colorado sun was bright but not yet oppressive, and there was a gentle breeze that made the air perfect for our daily walk. Joshua had grown into a strong, healthy dog, and our morning walks had become the highlight of both our days. We had established a routine, down Elm Street, around the neighborhood park, and back home for breakfast. We approached the intersection at 3rd and Elm, a crosswalk I had navigated hundreds of times. The signal was red and traffic had stopped. I checked both directions, saw the halted vehicles, and stepped into the crosswalk with Joshua trotting beside me on his leash. We were halfway across when I heard the roar of an engine behind us. A pickup truck came speeding around the stopped cars, weaving between lanes at a reckless speed. The driver was young, careless, treating the morning traffic like his personal racetrack. Time slowed as I watched him approach. I yanked hard on Joshua's leash, trying to pull him back, but it was too late. The truck's bumper struck Joshua, sending his body flying through the air. The impact tore the leash from my hands and sent me tumbling across the asphalt. I felt my body lift off the ground, suspended in a moment that seemed to last forever before crashing down with devastating force. My head struck the concrete curb with a crack that seemed to echo through my skull. Then, darkness. I found myself floating in what felt like warm, luminous energy. The pain was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace I had never experienced. I was no longer bound by the weight of my physical form, no longer anchored to the grief that had defined my existence for so long. I felt lighter than air, yet more real than I had ever felt in life. As my consciousness adjusted to this new reality, I became aware of a presence approaching. The light around me began to take shape, forming into a figure of indescribable majesty and love. I knew immediately who it was, though my mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. Christ stood before me, radiating a warmth and compassion that penetrated every corner of my being. His eyes held depths of understanding that seemed to encompass all of human suffering and joy. When he spoke, his voice carried the gentleness of a summer breeze and the authority of thunder. "Rebecca," he said, and hearing my name spoken with such love brought tears to my spiritual eyes. "Do not be afraid. You are here because there is something you must understand, something that concerns not only you but also Joshua." The mention of Joshua's name sent a wave of anguish through me. "Lord," I cried, "is he alive? Did he survive?" I tried to save him, but I failed. I failed him just like I failed Michael. Christ stepped closer, and I felt his infinite compassion washing over me. "Rebecca, you did not fail anyone. What happened today was not your fault, and it was not without purpose. Joshua was sent to you for this very reason." "Sent to me?" I asked, confused. "Lord, I found him dying behind a construction site. Someone had abandoned him to die." Christ nodded gently. "And what made you stop that day? What made you, a woman who had never wanted a pet, suddenly care enough to save a dying puppy?" As he spoke, I began to understand. That day, I had been walking the same route I walked every day, lost in my grief, barely aware of the world around me. But something about Joshua's cry had penetrated through my numbness. It wasn't just compassion that made me stop, it was recognition. In his suffering, I had seen my own. "You and Joshua are two wounded souls who found each other," Christ continued. "His abandonment mirrored your sense of abandonment after Michael's death. His physical hunger reflected your spiritual hunger. His need for healing was the same as yours." I thought about the months we had spent together, how caring for him had forced me to care about something again, how his dependence on me had given me a reason to rise each morning, how his joy in simple things, like walks and meals, had slowly reminded me that life could still hold moments of happiness. "But Lord," I said, my voice breaking, "why did it have to end this way? Just when I was learning to live again, just when I was finding my way back to faith, why did you allow this to happen?" Christ looked at me with infinite tenderness. "Rebecca, what makes you think this is the end?" Before I could respond, he gestured, and the space around us began to transform. We were no longer floating in abstract light, but standing in what appeared to be a vast, beautiful landscape. Rolling hills stretched as far as I could see, covered in grass so green it seemed to glow with its own inner light. Crystal clear streams wound through valleys filled with flowers of every color imaginable. The air itself seemed alive with peace and joy. "This is a glimpse of the new earth that is coming," Christ said, "the home that awaits all who belong to me. But look closer, Rebecca. Look and see who else will be here." As my spiritual eyes adjusted to this perfect landscape, I began to see movement. Animals of every kind were everywhere, but not as I had ever seen them before. Lions walked peacefully alongside lambs, their eyes free of predatory hunger. Deer grazed next to wolves without fear. Eagles soared overhead, while doves nested in their wings. It was the peaceable kingdom that Isaiah had prophesied, but seeing it was beyond anything I could have imagined. Then, running across one of the distant hills, I saw a figure that made my heart leap. A border collie, strong and healthy, bounding through the grass with pure joy. Even at this distance, I recognized something in the way he moved, something unmistakable. "Joshua," I whispered. "Yes," Christ said, smiling. "He is here, Rebecca. He is safe, healed, and waiting for you." I felt tears streaming down my face. "But Lord, how is this possible? I thought animals don't have souls, that they don't go to heaven." Christ turned to me, his expression serious but loving. "Rebecca, listen carefully to what I am about to tell you, for this truth has been misunderstood by many of my children. Animals do not have souls in the same way that humans do. They are not made in the image of God as you are. They do not choose between good and evil. They do not sin, and they are not called to account for moral choices as humans are." I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. If animals didn't have souls, how could Joshua be here? Christ continued, "But they do have spirits, Rebecca. They have the breath of life that comes from the Father, and that spark of divine life is never lost. When I formed the animals, I breathed into them the breath of life, just as I did with Adam, though in a different way. That breath, that spirit returns to the one who gave it." He gestured toward the landscape around us. "Do you remember what is written in Romans chapter 8? For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God." As he quoted these words, I felt understanding dawning in my mind. "You mean that all of creation will be redeemed?" When sin entered the world through Adam's disobedience, all of creation fell under the curse, Christ explained. Death, suffering, predation, natural disasters, none of these were part of my Father's original design. In the beginning, in Eden, the lion lay down with the lamb not as a metaphor, but as reality. Animals lived in harmony with each other and with mankind. I looked around at the peaceful scene surrounding us, understanding flooding through me. "And when you return, when you establish your kingdom, creation will be restored to what it was meant to be." "Exactly," Christ said. "The new earth will not be some ethereal, spiritual realm where only human souls exist in isolation. It will be a physical place, more real than the earth you know now, where the redeemed of humanity will live in resurrected bodies, and it will be filled with the animals that my Father created for your joy and companionship." As if summoned by our conversation, I saw Joshua in the distance suddenly lift his head and look in our direction. Even across that vast space, I could see his tail begin to wag. He started running toward us, and as he drew closer, I could see that he was not just healthy, but glorious. His coat gleamed like silver in the eternal light. His eyes sparkled with intelligence and joy, and his whole being radiated the peace of this perfect realm. When he reached us, he jumped up to greet me, just as he had every morning on earth. But now I could somehow understand the joy and love he was trying to communicate. It wasn't barking or whimpering, but pure emotional communication that transcended the need for words. "Hello, my faithful friend," I said, kneeling to embrace him. His fur felt real under my hands, but somehow more real than anything I had ever touched. "I'm so sorry about what happened. I tried to save you. Through some kind of spiritual communication that bypassed human language, I understood his response. You did save me, Rebecca. You saved me that day behind the construction site, and I was sent to save you. We saved each other just as God intended. Christ placed his hand on both of us. This is the truth, Rebecca. Animals, especially those who have shared their lives with humans in love, are part of my Father's plan of redemption. They are not an afterthought or a consolation prize for emotional humans. They are part of the family of creation that will be restored when I make all things new. I looked up at Christ through my tears. But Lord, what about the timing? I know your return is near. I can feel it in the world, in the chaos and darkness that seems to be increasing every day. What will happen to the animals when you come for your church? Christ's expression became more serious. You are right to sense that my return is imminent, Rebecca. The signs that I spoke of are being fulfilled before your eyes. The love of many has grown cold. Nation rises against nation. There are earthquakes and famines and pestilences, and the gospel is being preached to all nations. The time of my coming for my bride is very near." He paused, looking out over the eternal landscape. "But I see that many of my people are not ready. They are distracted by the cares of this world. They have grown comfortable in their sin. They are not watching and praying as I commanded. Their love for me has grown lukewarm." I felt a chill run through my spirit. "Will you delay your coming, Lord?" "I may delay it for a short time," Christ said. "Perhaps a few months to give my people more time to prepare their hearts. But Rebecca, understand this. I will not delay indefinitely. There comes a point when mercy's door must close and judgment must begin. And when you do come," I asked urgently, "what will happen to the animals left behind?" Christ looked at me with great compassion. "This is part of what you must understand and share with others. When I come for my church, I will not be coming to the earth itself, but to meet my bride in the air. The animals will remain on earth, and their fate will depend largely on what happens to their human companions." He began to show me visions as he spoke. Some animals belong to believers who will be taken in my coming. These pets will be left behind temporarily, but many of them will be cared for by family members or friends who were not ready for my coming. Some will suffer during the tribulation that follows, as all of creation will suffer during that time of judgment. The visions he showed me were heartbreaking. Dogs and cats wandering empty houses, calling for their owners who would never return. Horses in fields with no one to care for them. Pets in shelters that would overflow with animals whose Christian owners had vanished. "But Lord," I said, "what about their eternal destiny? Will they be lost forever?" "No, Rebecca," Christ said firmly. "Here's the truth that will comfort many hearts. Those animals that have been beloved companions of my children will not be lost. When I return to establish my earthly kingdom after the tribulation, when I resurrect the righteous and they rule and reign with me for 1,000 years, these animals will be part of that restoration." He showed me another vision, the earth renewed and restored, with believing humans in glorified bodies walking among animals that had been resurrected and perfected. I saw dogs playing with children who would never again know death, cats purring in the laps of their beloved owners, horses galloping across fields that knew no drought or famine. "And after the 1,000 years," Christ continued, "when I create the new heaven and the new earth, when the holy city, New Jerusalem, comes down from heaven, these beloved creatures will be part of that eternal kingdom. Death will be no more, mourning and crying and pain will be no more, and the relationships of love forged on the old earth will continue in perfection forever." I was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was showing me. "So even pets that die before your coming, like Joshua, will be resurrected?" "Yes," Christ said. "Death is an enemy that I came to defeat. On the cross, I conquered not only spiritual death, but physical death as well. When I rose from the dead, I proved that death has no permanent claim on anything that belongs to God. The animals that have been loved by my children belong to God, and death cannot hold them." I thought about all the Christians I knew who had lost beloved pets, who had grieved deeply and wondered if they would ever see their furry friends again. "Lord, this will bring such comfort to so many people. Why isn't this truth taught more clearly in churches?" Christ sighed, and I could sense his sadness. "Many of my servants have focused so much on the spiritual realm that they have forgotten I am also redeeming the physical realm. They have made the mistake of thinking that heaven is some disembodied existence where souls float on clouds playing harps, but that is not the paradise I have prepared." He gestured to the world around us. "The kingdom I am preparing is a real place, with real bodies, real relationships, and yes, real animals. I am not destroying creation, Rebecca. I am renewing it. I am not discarding the physical world. I am perfecting it." Christ then showed me something that took my breath away. In the distance, I saw Michael walking across one of the rolling hills. He looked exactly as he had in his prime, but radiating a glory and beauty that was beyond anything earthly. And running beside him was a golden retriever he had always wanted, but we had never gotten. "Michael always wanted a golden retriever," I said, tears streaming down my face. "And in the kingdom, he will have all the animal companions he ever desired," Christ said. "The love he would have given to earthly pets is not wasted, Rebecca. In eternity, every desire for love and companionship that goes unfulfilled on earth will be more than satisfied. As I watched, Michael looked in our direction and waved. The golden retriever barked joyfully and started running toward us. Behind them, I could see other people walking with various animals. Some I recognized as pets I had known, others that seemed to be wild animals that showed no fear of humans. Michael reached us, and I was able to embrace my beloved husband for the first time since his death. He felt solid, real, but somehow perfected. The stress lines that work and worry had carved on his face were gone, replaced by a radiance that seemed to shine from within. "Rebecca," he said, and his voice was like music. "I've been waiting for you, and I've been watching over you. I saw how God sent Joshua to comfort you. I saw how you loved him and how he loved you. And I want you to know that every moment of that love was preparing you for this." The golden retriever that had been running with him came up to me, tail wagging, as friendly as if we were old companions. "This is Ranger," Michael said. "The dog I always wanted but never had time for. Here, we have all the time we need for love." "But I have to go back, don't I?" I asked Christ, though part of me desperately wanted to stay in this place of perfect peace and reunion. Christ nodded. "Your time has not yet come, Rebecca. You have a purpose to fulfill. You must return and share what you have seen. There are millions of my children who are grieving the loss of beloved animals, wondering if they will ever see them again. They need to know the truth." Christ then began to show me specific things I needed to understand and share. "Rebecca, many of my people are confused about the nature of animals because they have misunderstood the nature of the soul. They think that because animals don't have immortal souls like humans, they cannot exist in eternity. But they fail to understand that I am not just saving souls, I am redeeming all of creation." He showed me visions of the original creation, before the fall. In Eden, Adam and Eve lived in perfect harmony with the animals. They were vegetarians, as were all the animals. There was no death, no predation, no fear. The animals were companions and helpers to humanity, just as they are meant to be in the restored earth. "When sin entered the world, it corrupted everything," he continued. "Animals began to fear humans and to prey on each other. The ground began to produce thorns and thistles. Natural disasters began to occur. Death entered creation. But this was never my original plan, and it is not my final plan. But even in the fallen world, I have preserved glimpses of the original harmony," Christ said. "When a human and an animal form a bond of love, when they care for each other and find joy in each other's company, they are experiencing a foretaste of Eden restored." He then addressed something that made me weep. "Rebecca, you're wondering about animals that have suffered abuse or neglect, animals that have died in pain or fear. Let me show you their fate in the kingdom." The scene around us shifted, and I saw what appeared to be a vast animal sanctuary. These were animals that bore the marks of having suffered, yet they were now completely healed and at peace. I saw dogs that had been beaten by cruel owners, now playing joyfully with children. I saw horses that had been overworked and neglected, now running free across endless pastures. "Every act of cruelty toward one of my creatures is recorded in heaven," Christ said, and I could hear righteous anger in his voice. "Those who abuse animals will answer for their actions, but the animals themselves, the innocent victims of human sin, will be more than compensated in the kingdom." Christ's expression became stern when I asked about skeptics. "Those who despise my creatures despise part of my creation. Those who think love for animals is foolish have hardened their hearts to one of the ways I reveal my character to the world." The same spirit that allows humans to abuse and neglect animals is the same spirit that allows them to abuse and neglect other humans. Cruelty to animals is often the first sign of a heart that has grown cold to love itself. "So when you judge the nations," I asked, "will their treatment of animals be part of that judgment?" Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you're still here, it means your heart has been touched. Take one step of faith today. Write your city in the comments so we can pray for your land, subscribe, and turn on the bell to keep receiving these messages, and share this word with 3 people you love, because one share can change a soul forever. We also prepared a free ebook to guide you closer to heaven, bring peace to your heart, and give you strength in these dark times. It won't always be available, so don't wait. Take it now and let this be your step into God's eternal light.